Welcome back to another episode of Close to Broke. Today's episode is going to be a continuation to the last one that you guys just saw. Trust me, you want to hang in there. Today's episode is full of ups and downs and a couple of really important things at the end of this session. At the very, very end, we're going to be hopping in and talking very directly and openly and honestly about my poker end of year numbers. It's going to be pretty surprising to some of y'all, I think. So without a further ado, let's hop into the very first hand of note. Looks like we're picking up exactly where we left off. When this situation comes up, middle position makes it $60 to go. The button by the name of Armenian Matt, as you guys almost should know by now, he decides to just jam it all in for $915. With the action folded back over to me, I have about 2,000 in my stack at this point, and I look down at King Jack offsuit. Not a great hand, honestly, but against an opponent that has slightly less than me, I think somewhere around 1,400 that initially raised, I decided to just take this opportunity, and I decided to rejam for about 2,000. Initial raiser snap fools, which is good. We're going to go off to two boards here, and our opponent's snap shows a 7 of hearts. So far, looks pretty good for us. We decided to run out two boards. The first board comes out deuce 5-6, turn jack, bingo. River card is an 8 of spades. The second board comes out 8-3-8, turn 6, river 5. Our opponent then exposes the ace of hearts to go along with his 7 of hearts. So we're going to go ahead and chop this first one up. Fun, but trust me, guys. Today's episode has way more poker than all in, so let's hop into it because we still have a $20,000+ pot to talk about. Okay, well, let's put that all-in madness behind us when we go into this next hand, which is a really, really sick one. The game's been bumped up to 10-20, so there is no 5-5-10 action with $20. No more 4 blind nonsense. We're hopping into some big game poker. Anyways, in this next hand, this is a really, really sick one. There's a straddle onto $40 here, and I find myself in said straddle. Middle position decides to raise to $120. The big blind decides to make the call, and we look down at King Queen offsuit here from the straddle. I think this is a really good spot to isolate and to just pretty much take down almost $250, $260 pre-flop. So I decided to 3-bet here as this hand plays well as a hand to do so. I make it $500 to go. At this point, the unexpected happens. Well, it almost should be expected at this point when both my opponents decide to make the call. Now this is turned into a steal spot to a super bloated pot going with over 1,500 in the middle to a flop that comes amazing. King 3-7 with 2 diamonds. There is a flush draw to be worried about, but outside of all of that, not too worried. I decided to throw out a pretty meaty c-bet of about half the size of the pot for $700 when it's checked to me, and the initial raiser decides to call, and my opponent to my right decides to fold. When my opponent just calls here, I'm not too worried about a diamond, although it is possible. I think if our opponent had an ace-queen or ace-jack of diamonds, it would definitely make sense. The turn card comes a deuce of diamonds. Kind of a hit or miss spot for me now. The thing I'm now worried about, as we mentioned, was the flush draw completing. And even if our opponent doesn't have a flush draw, the problem becomes how do we still get value in a spot like this? I have about $2,700 in my stack remaining, and that's a kind of a funky little SPR here. I'm at about a little bit above 1.1. So I decided to just do something a little unorthodox and go all in here. Again, we're fading the snap call, which we end up doing, which makes me feel really good now. At this point, I'm just hoping and praying for a call here. Again, don't try this at home. There's a lot of the times where your opponent just snaps call and shows you the nuts. But in this specific spot, I think being able to deduce that it's less likely for my opponent to have a flush, considering I do have the queen of diamonds. And at the end of the day, if our opponent had a hand like a 9-high flush, we're still not drawing dead against that. But moreover, there's still a massive chance we can get value here. Our opponent goes deep into the tank for well over 2 minutes before eventually deciding on a call. All right. We end up deciding to run the board out twice here. The first board comes out a 10 of diamonds, improving us now to a flush. And the river card comes a 5 of clubs on the second board. We show our hand, and it is in fact good. Our opponent flashes over a king, so it makes me feel really proud of myself for getting value in a spot that maybe be tough to get it otherwise. I think that's where, I guess, exploitative play, and specifically knowing your opponent, works well. If only I took this advice more often. Either way, a monstrous pot to get us close to the black finally comes in our way. Alright, here we are battling once again, And what's going to be different in the second half of today's session from the first half is that I'm looking to be super aggressive here. I'm going to be taking my spots. I'm going to be 3-betting a lot more often. I'm going to be playing a little less passive, and hopefully the assertiveness is going to pay off in dividends. Either way, we'll see here in this next spot where early position decides to make it $80 to go. The cutoff and the button make the call. I find myself here from the blinds, and I look down at ace-10 of hearts. I decided 3-bet to $400, looking to thin the field, which, once again, I don't even know why I think that optimistically, as everyone calls the cutoff, the early position player, and the button all call. We're going 4 ways off to a flop that doesn't help us in the slightest, as it comes 8-5 deuce rainbow. With the action on me, I decided to just check it here. I think I'm pretty much check give upping on a flop like this if there's a bet and a call, but luckily for us, it ends up checking through. Alright, well, maybe we still have the best hand. It's hard to tell considering how wide these ranges have been pre-flop and post-flop. Either way, we're going off to a turn card that comes with 3 of clubs here, now improving me to a gutter ball. I think it'd be better here now to throw out a little bet here as a bluff here, but in real time, I just decide to check it. Initial raiser decides to take over the betting reins and bets for 700. Everyone folds, the action gets to me, and considering I do have a gutter ball and there is a chance against this specific player, Mr. AB, that he is bluffing, I decide to make the call here, peel one off, and we're going off to a river card that comes a 5 of diamonds. Pairing the board here, again, now I feel even better about my hand, and in time, I'm telling myself if AB bets anything less than $2,000, I'm going to call here. Either way, I check it over to AB, and he does not do that. He decides to throw out a bet of $2,600. Now I'm even more confused. I just don't find a ton of hands for value in my opponent's range, even so much so that we go deep into the tank and we start doing some table talk.
AB, I'm almost positive you're bluffing, but there's a small chance that I'd lose to your bluff. I don't have a pair, that's what I'm saying. How much is that? You always ask me, do you want to call? Oh man, you're a fucking gangster. It just felt like genuine indecision on the river, like you didn't know, like it could have been you didn't know how big to go for value, you know what I'm saying? God bless your soul.
I've got to relinquish my hand here. Some of his air balls consist of like ace jack, and that would just suck to call and be wrong. So I relinquish my hand, and I ask AB to show, and he does in fact show the old jack 10 offsuit. Oh my gosh. I stand up, applaud my opponent, and I give him a handshake to let him know that was one of the sickest bluffs today. Oh man, we just can't catch a break. We should have had him. Alright, well they don't call me the comeback kid for nothing, so let's hop right into this next hand. We're ready to battle. In this following hand, I decided to raise it to $80 over an under the gun limper. I end up getting 3 calls, one of those being the limpers, and we're going 4 ways off to a flop that comes ace king 7 with 2 hearts and a spade. Not a great flop for my specific hand, but a really good flop for my entire range here. I decided to throw out a small c-bet of $150. I get 2 callers, one of them being the limper again, and we're going off to a turn card that comes the ace of hearts. Wow, that is literally the worst card to possibly bluff at with exactly my holding. The flush gets there, and even worse, the top card pairs, which, again, no one ever bluffs at. And then, ding! A little light bulb appears above my head. Oh my gosh, no one ever bluffs here. So even if my opponents happen to have like a middling king, even if my opponents have like a weird pocket jacks or pocket tens, whatever kind of weird holding our opponents have, I block those hands, so those are probably unlikely. But what's more than likely is my opponents either have a weak king, middling lower pairs, and I've got to really go for it. Even if we bet and get called here, I think we have a really good spot to go for 3 streets. Again, think less about my specific hand because it does suck. But again, the one thing that is good for us is that we do have really good board coverage here. I'm going to have jack 10 of hearts here as often I'm going to have jack 10 offsuit, I guess. But either way, I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. I just decide to go for it. I bet $550. Spots like this don't come very often, and it's fun to just find a bluff here. Either way, our opponents don't feel like believers, but they end up throwing it away anyways. So I feel really cool about that. I'm happy to get that one through. Moving on. Well, we've been through an entire episode so far, and we haven't had one of these, but here it is. Playing the PLO double board bomb pot game, $50 each person. We're going 8 ways off to a flop. The top board comes out king, queen, 4 with 2 clubs, and the bottom board comes out 10, 9, 3 rainbow. We get a chance to look down at our hand, which is king, queen, 4, 8, which is the suited king, queen of hearts variety. The first player to act here decides to draw a PLO pot bet of $400. With the action on me now, I decide to throw up the aggression. That's what I decide to do. Our opponent to our left decides to call all in for less, about $700. And then out of nowhere, one of the tightest players at the table on the button decides to say pot. And not that he's one of the tighter players at the table, but he's playing a little tighter specifically in the bomb pot games because he is new to the PLO game variety. Either way, the opponent to my right decides to call all in for about $3,000 and the action falls on me. Well, with all of the money in the middle, if I commit my entire stack here, we're looking at over a $20,000 pot. There is a ton of equity out there for my opponents to have. Sure, and it's scary because I only have top 2 pair, but in a spot like this, multi-way, I think it'd be a really, really rough time to get scooped here, and we're looking really live with our cards. Either way, we muster up the courage and put our stack in the middle, and yes, you're reading that correct. We're playing for a main pot of $3,200, a side pot of $7,000, and a side second pot of almost $10,000. We're going to need to hold or catch up where it need be. The top board comes out with a 6 of diamonds. The bottom board comes out with the 2 of spades. And the river card on both boards comes out a 7 of clubs and then a 7 of hearts. We're not doing too bad here as we end up fading what seems like a really nasty run out. This seems pretty reasonable to me. I show my holding. A couple of people are saying straights here. A couple of people are saying flushes over there. But the main thing for me is that me and the really large stack, because we're both playing for that side pot of 9K, which is something to be really worried about. He says he's playing just one board and has a set of 10s, which is pretty good, as the worst thing that can happen here is that we end up losing a small amount in the side pots, and we still have like 5 or 6K in front of us. All of that comes to none where our opponent ends up realizing that he also has a flush on the top board that we were playing. He shows 10, 10, 3 deuce, and he's going to go ahead and scoop me with the 10 deuce of clubs. So this is a really, really crummy spot. I think the biggest pot I've shown on the vlog maybe, or second biggest, and we get scooped. Oh my god. Even the worst part is nobody has a jack here, so it seems like we had a pretty reasonable amount of outs. And even worse, there's 6 clubs accounted for. So there's only 4 or 5 clubs left in the entire deck on the board I was a massive favorite on. Oh my goodness. These bomb pots are going to be the death of me. Well, I've got to really figure out what's going on in my head because I don't even know how to react or move on from this. Okay, so a couple things are going to happen. The vlog's going to end here and I'm down 8,500. Or after this walk, I'm going to feel good enough to go play. The only problem is it's super late already and I'm stuck a lot and the game's already short-handed. This is either a mid-session update or I'm out. It's one of the 2 options, so. Oh man, that was a really frustrating last pot. You guys have a nice day. It's either this or I go play, and not feeling great right now, so we'll see what happens. Well, as you guys can see, I came back to play. After all of that, we find ourselves back in the game, buying back in for $5,000. We're into the game for $13,000 at this point, looking to at least crawl out of the hole. Either way, in this next hand, $40 straddle is on, and under the gun limps, we bump it up to 200. The opponent to our left decides to make the call. The action gets folded back to the initial limper, and he decides to back raise all in for about 1,000. Action on me with a hand this strong doesn't really do me any justice to try to play this like a trap. Playing out of position to an opponent to my left here with a really bloated pot doesn't make sense. I'd rather get the money in the middle and see all 5 cards, so I decided to just jam here. Our opponent to our left has about 3.5 or 4,000. He ends up making the fold here. didn't expect them to call there after just flatting my initial raise. All of that being said, we're going off to 2 boards here. The first board comes out ace queen high, which is great for us as we immediately show. Looks like we're good there. And the second board comes out 8 high as it comes 7-5 deuce 8 deuce. We are going to go ahead and scoop the entire pot as our opponent folds. Finally, something going in our direction. All right, in this next spot, the video is going to start a little late, so bear with me. I'm under the gun and I decide to raise to $60. An opponent to my left calls, and then the button, Mr. AB, decides to 3-bet to 275. With the action folded back to me, we have pocket jacks, so there's no right way to play it. I can just call, I can 4-bet, but against a player like AB who's definitely capable of having bluffs on the button with the 3-bet, I decide to 4-bet here, looking to get this taken down either pre-flop or even if we go out of position to a flop. We do have jacks, right? At the end of the day, it's not the worst hand in the world. I make it $660 for the 4-bets. Folds back to my opponent on the button who decides to make the call. We're going off to a flop that's way too bloated for pocket jacks. And the flop, I mean, could you have guessed it, right? Comes ace high, of course. Ace 5-5. With the action on me, let's continue to do some funky stuff here. I throw out a bet of $400. I think a down bet is okay. I'd be betting range here. Ace king, ace queen, ace jack. All those hands would be betting. Our opponent decides to make the call here, which is a little concerning, but not the end of the world. There's a small chance our opponent has 10s or 9s here. Either way, we're going off to a turn card that comes a queen of hearts. Yet another overcard to my hand. And now is where I think we've gone from kind of permissible actions to absolutely ridiculous actions. I just had a bet once again for $700. I think in real time I'm thinking that I can, I guess, turn my hand into a bluff, and I don't know, when am I getting kings to fold, or I really don't know. But either way, that is what I decide to do, and our opponent pretty quickly puts an end to that by raising to 2.5k. We don't have any decision here besides folding. Yeah, let's move on. All right, we're going to the latter half of the session. We're playing 6-handed this next spot where middle position decides to make it $120 to go. The button decides to make the call, and I'm in the big blind, and we look down at ace queen offsuit. I decide to 3-bet it up here to $400. The initial raiser decides to make the call, which is Mr. AB. We have literally been getting dissected and carved by him outside of the 1 king queen hand. Hopefully this hand's not the same. The flop comes out Jack 8-5 rainbow. Not the best board in the world for me, but I think we have pretty solid board coverage. I decided to throw out a c-bet here, showing some aggression, showing some power. I make it $400 to go. Our opponent makes a call. The turn card comes at 10 of diamonds. This is a really good card as it brings us another card that is under an ace and a queen, but it does introduce more outs. I decided to throw out a bet here, a little more meatier for $1,000. Our opponent is not going away. He makes a call. We're going off to a river card that comes an interesting 3 of diamonds. Okay, well, we have the ace of diamonds, and if you're ever going to bluff in a spot like this, I think this is the run out to do it on. Sure, our opponent can still have a straight here once in a while, but I think our opponent's going to have a whole lot of 1 pair, and I think that there's a good chance we can get 1 pair to fold. Although this is a little contradictory to what I said earlier about our specific opponent maybe not finding many folds in this spot, I make a bet for $2,500, and I can't even get it out fast enough. My opponent snap calls. Well, that sucks. We flip over our hand, and our opponent shows king jack offsuit. Good call down from our opponent. Man, a king would have been absolutely Yahtzee, but here we are, battling back, going further and further into the red. Well, I'm trying to do my very best to hold my composure here. It's been a really rough session. I'm not here to defend my actions. I'll get crucified or praised, whatever I end up doing. So in this following hand, we have another fun spot. There's a $40 straddle on under the gun limps. Actions on me in the big blind with queen 10 of hearts. Gonna be cool to make it $200. Limper calls. We're going heads up to a flop that comes 10-8-5 rainbow. We flop ourselves top pair. Good kicker and a backdoor flush draw to boot. I decided to throw out a c-bet of $200. Our opponent pretty quickly makes a call, and the turn card comes a 4 of clubs. Does bring in some straights, but once again, I'm in absolute screw it mode. I decided to just go all in here for about $1,200. Not much explanation. I'm going 1.5 sides of the pot here. We decided to run 2 rivers. The first river comes out the king of diamonds. The second board pairs the board, coming out the 4 of spades. We show, and we finally win a big hand. There we go. that is how you finish on top. Either way, let's talk to you guys more about it in person. And again, bear with me, guys. We're going to talk a little bit about the session and how it went. And then right after that, we're going to be going into my year-end totals.
So we ended up getting whacked. From the point you guys last saw me, we were up $700, almost $800. So we were into the game for 13 and out for like almost like 6K. So saw a little 7K loss. Doesn't hurt as much as last time. Whatever. We played meh, but we also ran really bad. Hopefully I can piece it together. Either way, see you guys in the next time.
All right, folks, here is what you guys have been waiting for, is a breakdown of my year on end. Here we go. Opening up the app now, we're looking at a pretty reasonable couple of numbers here. At the end of the year, for a year of 2022, there's a couple of like kind of telltale or interesting things I think to point out. First and foremost, the one that's glaring to me at least was my amount of time played. Only played about 335 hours, which if you do the math there over the year, that's like 5.5 hours every week, which is just not that much. Never claimed to be a pro. I think I sit in this spot where I think a lot of poker players live, which is like working professionals or working class individuals that, you know, dabble in poker, that are winning or slightly winning, break even, whatever the case may be. About $41,000 and some change is what we won over the year. Played about 109 sessions at an hourly rate at about 122, which is about 12 big blinds an hour for the 510, which is usually what I played for most of the year. Not too bad, honestly, not too bad. If you look at the graph for the year, we ended up not being able to peak or end on a peak, which is a little unfortunate. The one thing I will say, I don't know if this is right, but it just feels like it. Because I play so little, the variants feel more like impactful, if that makes sense. Either way, you can see that. So the ups are really high, as you can see in the middle of this graph here, and then the lows are really low. I think our worst month to date was, I think, June. We lost like 7,500. And looking back at this, I think I'm just disappointed because during that time I was playing tournaments in the WSOP, and tournaments and cash games are really hard to be able to like turn it on and off. It's a big difference, and I think that really affected my game there. My biggest month, luckily, was the month just prior, which was May. We ended up winning $31,000 this month. And even if you take away our biggest win of the year, which is the one in the middle, we still would have won $15K that month alone. You know, a couple of things to look at, and I think a couple of things to improve upon. I'm pretty intrigued by my numbers, if that's the word I should be using. There's space to be better at poker, and like I've talked about very often and openly, I don't think I'm some kind of super pro, super wizard. I like playing the game of poker. I like having fun. We're looking to play a little bit bigger, at least in this year to come. 510 will probably still be my bread and butter, where I make my most money. But if I can hop into anything bigger, if it's on a live stream game, I'll definitely take my own action in there and just kind of go for it. So the most important thing for me is that we continue to grow our relationship and the community here. If you guys are interested in joining the WSOP giveaway, I do it every year. This is my 3rd year running doing it. I'll get a couple of y'all tickets, a stay at an Airbnb, the flights, as well as a WSOP bracelet ticket or entry will all be taken care of by myself out of my own pocket. Hopefully one year I can get a sponsor to help me with this, but until then, it's going to be all out of my own pocket. If you guys are interested or curious how to get in, super simple. Send me a 60 to 90 second long video choosing or letting me know why I should choose you. You can send that email to the link down below or the link right here. That's just c2bpoker@gmail.com. So, I mean, it's like one of the sickest spots. It's absolutely free. You don't have to do anything besides sending a video over, being a subscriber to this channel, which is Close to Broke, and being a subscriber to Close to Broke podcast. Those are the 2 things. Super easy. Either way, that will do it for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. Tough one to end the year out on, but love you guys very much. Stay happy, stay healthy. More importantly, I want to go to the tables, y'all.
I just want to win. Yeah. LA BB, who we running with? Yeah. 2, 2, 3, 3. I'm on 10, 10, 10. Yeah.